All right, guys, so our first lesson with statistics, bless you, is because since we've been dealing with probability, right, we're moving on to statistics. So it's been able to, statistics is a branch of math that's been able to take numbers and being able to take numbers and looking at them in a way that it's kind of where we can analyze them, where we can look and give us some kind of results based off of whatever it is we're looking at. Okay, not common for something that it's not something that we do in seventh grade. However, as you get older, not only math classes, but this is more common, especially when you get jobs. And if you're gonna get, and you don't have to have a math job to look at this. Okay, if you're in any kind of business, you have to be able to improve your business, you have to look at numbers. Okay, so we're going to start with something called box and whisker plots. Now, just to give you a heads up, this lesson is going to go with our following lesson. Okay, this is kind of a prerequisite, meaning that it's something you need to know before I teach you your actual seventh grade lesson. What I've found over the years is that while this, you guys should have already done this in elementary school and talked about this, I've realized that a lot of students come to me that don't have this. So I always teach this every year before I teach you the next lesson. All right, so if you don't understand this lesson, you're going to have a very difficult time with the next lesson. All right, but I think this is pretty easy to understand as long as you follow along. Okay, so here's the thing, is that these, for the next lesson's vocab is in your vocab work. Okay, these vocabulary words are not, because this isn't out of our book. Like I said, this is a helper. It's a step up, or I should say a step down from what we're going to learn in our next lesson. So don't worry about writing these down. You do need to worry about these though, because this is very vocab based, this lesson. All right, so the very first one is box and whisker plots. Everyone? Okay, so here's what a box and whisker plot is. It's a graph that displays the highest and lowest quarters of data as whiskers, the middle two quarters of the data as a box, and it has the median. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do in this lesson. All right, before we get to drawing these or analyzing these, reading them, I want to do a small, quick. Well, we go through our vocab, I want to do a little small, quick activity with you guys. So here's what I'd like you to do. I need 8 volunteers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, the 8 of you guys I just pointed out, do me a favor. Go ahead and line up in the back of the class. So you get to get out of your seat. Okay, so here's what I'd like you guys to do. For this to work, you're going to be doing like some stepping forward and back. So we need a little room, but I also need you guys to be all together. So yeah, scoot over, crunch over. I'm going to have you two, where you're not in the way and you can get a better look. Why don't you guys move to a different desk, just temporarily. You don't have to take your notes with you because we're not writing anything down. All right? And then, like I said, the 8 of you guys kind of just get together. I guess you're okay right there. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to use these guys that are standing up, these fantastic volunteers, and I'm going to make a little small story out of the situation. Okay, so, and you're going to see me record it up here. Let's say these 8 students are music lovers. Okay, and these 8 students, what they do is they love their music, and they like to get music off of websites, and they do it legally. All right, so that means they go to the iTunes store. All right, so I know some of us don't like doing it that way, but that's how we're going to do it in this story. So we're going to iTunes. All right, and so when they go to iTunes, okay, going left to right. All right, I'm going to assign you guys the amount of songs that you guys downloaded last month, or I should say in the last month. All right, So here we go, going from this side, and you guys, unfortunately, those of you who are volunteering, you kind of have to think backwards. But from us, it works better like a normal number line if I go left to right. All right. So we have the first person orders 2 songs last month. The next person ordered 3 songs. The next person ordered 5 songs. The next person ordered 5 songs. The next person ordered 7 songs. The next person ordered 10 songs. The next person ordered 12 songs. And the very last person is a song junkie, ordered 50 songs. 50 songs. Okay? Alright. So, here's what I want to explain, alright? So, we have a long list. This is our data from these guys. This is our data. All right, and you guys are more than welcome to keep your fingers up. That actually probably helps everyone up here. You don't necessarily have to, but especially, the 50. Jaden, you can keep doing that if you like. Your hands get tired after a little while, but it's okay. All right, so we have the numbers, okay? They're in this exact listing, okay? Now, here's what I want to talk about. The very first thing is something called the minimum, or it's also called the lower extreme. Okay? And here's what it says. This is the smallest number of our data. So, taking a look at this data here, what's the minimum or the lower extreme? Alright? Aaron, go ahead and step up. There's your lower extreme. Okay? So when you guys see minimum or lower extreme, that's what it's talking about in our data. Now, it's not a person necessarily, it's the number of songs in this case. All right? The 2 songs is the lower extreme. All right? You can go ahead and step back. Thank you. All right, here's the next one. The maximum or the upper extreme. Okay? Which number is it, guys?
6.
It is 50, right? Who represents the maximum? All right. So we have our maximum or upper extreme. Okay? Now, that is the biggest number. All right? So, now we're going to get into something. It doesn't have this, and I probably should add it to the vocab here. But I'm going to add it right here. The median. Okay? Didn't go to step back. Thank you, sir. All right. Now, some of us probably don't remember this. You probably learned this when you did mean, median, and mode. Okay? So, when we're talking about something like this, when you're driving a car in the road, some cars are going one way and other cars are going the other. All right? And you have that. Even let's talk about the freeway. You have that big divider in the middle. What's that big divider in the middle called?
A wall.
The median.
Yeah, thank you. It's the median. Okay, so the median is in the middle. Okay, and as a matter of fact, guys, that is what median means. It's the middle part of the data. Okay, so let's take a look at what is represented up here. Each person represents a number of our data. Okay, let's start with which number is the middle.
7.
So if I circle or even cover 7, that if it's in the middle, that should mean that we have an even amount on both sides. Is that the case?
5 and 7.
You're absolutely right. There's an even amount. Now, if there was an odd amount, let's say there was one other number over here, like 100 or 51 or something like that, then 7 would be the median. Okay? However, that's not the case here. Okay? We have 2 middles. Okay? Now, this is an exception. This doesn't always happen, but if there's an even amount, there is no one middle number. So, if we need to find the middle number, it's not 5 or 7. However, what we're going to do is when it comes to median, what you do is you find the mean of the two numbers. So for example, 5 plus 7 is 12. Those of you that don't remember this, the mean is the average. So you add up the numbers, and then remember you divide by however many numbered data values that you added up. We added up two numbers, so we divide by 2. And our median would be 6 in this case. So that's not an actual number listing here, right? But it is a median. It's the middle parts of this data. Okay? So our median is 6 songs. Okay? 6 songs. Now, the reason why I talked about median was a nice little review, because our next one is something called the lower quartile or first quartile. As a matter of fact, you'll see both. Kind of the way that a lot of testing will call it nowadays is called the first quartile. So first quartile, everyone?
First quartile.
Okay, here's what it says. This is the median of the smaller half of the numbers. It's the median of the smaller half. So we have, I tell you what, let's go ahead. Raise your hand if you're part of my smaller half here. Okay, you see that? Everyone see that? Okay, go ahead, my smaller half, step forward. Okay, here's what's represented in that smaller half. Now 6 isn't part of the smaller half. It's the median, it's the middle. This is a smaller half. Now take a look what first quartile is. It's the median of the smaller half. Well, let's take a look at our smaller half. What's the median of our smaller half?
3. 4.
10.
Okay, well take a look. Do we have a middle person or a middle number here? No, so we, again, sometimes you'll have a perfect middle number. Ta-da, there'll be the perfect middle number, and those are the good, easy ones. But on some of them, you take that middle half, you're going to need to find the average of those two. Yeah, you guys are getting the hang of it. So 3 plus 5 is 8, right? You take 8, divide it by 2, 4. Okay, that'd be the first quartile, or the lower quartile with these. Okay? Now, another one. There's the upper quartile or the third quartile. So again, it's kind of leaning right now on testing towards third quartile. So third quartile, everyone.
Third quartile.
You guys might have a good idea. So I'm sorry, the 4 of you guys step back, please. Thank you guys. And we have the third quartile, which is the median of the bigger half of the number. So bigger half, step forward. And again, do we have, squish in. Okay. Do we have a middle number here?
Yes, wait.
10.
No.
Okay. There's our, here is our larger, here's our larger half. Right? There's the 4 that just stepped forward. Do we have a middle number?
Yes.
It's an even amount of data. So you take the 2 middles. And again, this is the worst case scenario where we had to average out every single one. It's not always going to be like that. We have 22. You take 22 and divide by 2. And our third quartile is 11. Okay? Now, here's what we're going to talk about. There's 2 other things I want to introduce. The first one, this is an elementary school word as well, but some of you guys may have forgotten it. It's the range. The range is the difference between the smallest data value and the largest. The difference, or you can even say the distance if you're dealing with a number line. What's the difference?
A lot.
48.
What you do is, of course, is subtract the 2. Our range is 48. So the distance between 2 and 50, the span of our data is 48 songs. That's the difference between them. Okay? Now, the very last thing, the reason why I want to talk about range is because I want to introduce something that is more of a middle school 7th grade piece of information here, or vocab. And it's something called the interquartile range. And here's what the interquartile range is. It is the distance between, not the smallest and the largest, it's the distance between the first quartile and the third quartile. So in this particular case, our first quartile is 4, our third quartile is 11. The difference, of course, 11 minus 4, our interquartile range here is 7. Okay. Now, on this lesson, what we're about to do is we're going to go over this. We're going to take a little bit of a deeper look to understand what a box and whisker plot is. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take something that is similar, or it is a box and whisker plot, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the importance and how to read these things and analyze them. Okay? So, thank you guys. Let's give them a hand for them standing up and being our volunteers. Okay. So, here is what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and take your worksheets. And you have this worksheet here. That's actually for our next lesson. That's the 7th grade standard. But what we're going to do is we're going to start basic. Go to the second page and let's take a look at this worksheet. Okay, name, date, period up at the top. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. Problem number 1, let's take a look at that. All right, all this is all we're doing is we're fitting in some just basically the vocab words. What you see up here is what a box and whisker plot will look like. Okay, in general, this is what it looks like. So when we talk about this, it's talking about the 5 parts. Now there is a typo here. You see the upper quartile? Change that to the third quartile. It's not the first, it's the third. And the lower quartile is the first quartile. All right, so this is mainly for note purposes. So here we go. Our 5 parts, the very first part is the median. Remember, that was the middle number, and we had to average it out. And when you find whatever that middle number is, it on a box and whisker is that little line inside the box. That is our median. That's what that little line represents. That represents our median. Okay, we have our upper quartile. Remember, that was the median of the larger numbers. When I had the 4 students that represented the larger number of music downloads songs, okay, that when they stepped up and we found the middle, okay, that is what the upper quartile or the third quartile was. The third quartile is the end of the box. It's that right there. So let's label it third quartile. That's the middle of the upper half. Now, on a box and whisker, if that right side is the third quartile, you might have a good guess. The first quartile is the left side of the box. That's our first quartile. And then out of all the students standing up, right, we started with this one, the minimum. It was the smallest number of music downloads, right? We had that person step up. It was represented by 2 downloads, right? Well, our minimum, of course, is all the way to the very end on the left, and that's that whisker out there, that plotted point on the end of that whisker. That's our minimum, sometimes called the lower extreme. And our maximum, of course, is the one on the very far right. That's our maximum. That represents the most downloaded, or number of downloaded songs in our story. Okay, now, those are the names of the different parts. But what I want to talk about is I want to talk about all of the quartiles. Now, when we talk about quartiles, that word quartile right there looks like it comes from the base word what, guys? Quarter. And when we talk about a quarter, right, how talk about money, how much money is that? 25 cents. Now, also, when we talk about fractions, what kind of fraction of a dollar is a quarter? It's a fourth. And a fourth, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to percentages is what? 25%. So we get the idea. Now, these are called quartiles for a reason. Because each quartile, or each part of the box and whisker, represents 25% of the data. Now, this is very important to understand. Let me go back to our data here from our story. Okay? What we see here is everything broken up into quarters. Okay? If I'm to break this up, take a look. This has nothing to do with the value of each one. In this case, the number of songs downloaded. That's not what it has to deal with. What this has to deal with is the number of responses that were given. Okay? The number of people that were asked, how many songs did you download? That's what this means. So what I'm talking about is if we take a look, see how I split it right down the middle where all of our quartiles were, our median, our first, and our third quartile? Take a look. They're divided evenly. They're divided into fourths. And because we had 8 responders in this survey, right, of people downloading songs, 1/4 of 8 is 2. Or you say 8 divided by 4, right? Split into 4, divided into 4. You had 2 people in each section. 25% here, 25% here, 25% of the responders here. Doesn't have to do with value of songs, the number of songs downloaded. That's not what it's saying. It's how many people are responding. So when we talk about this, it says, using the box and whisker plot shown, identify what percentage of the data lies in each region. That's what this is talking about. Guys, between the minimum and the first quartile is 25% of the data. Between the first quartile and the median, 25%. Between the median and the upper quartile, or the third quartile, 25%. And between the third quartile and the maximum, 25%. Okay. Now, before I move on, are there any questions on, first of all our vocab words, where they fit on the diagram, or even kind of how to read the percentage part of this? This is very important for our next few problems here. All right, let's go ahead then, and I'm going to try out I'm going to go ahead and do a problem, then I'll give you guys one to try out. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at problem. We're going to go to the first section down here. Let's look at problem number 5. Okay, all this is doing, now if you notice, this is how a real box and whisker plot is represented. It's either below or above a number line. Because what that tells us is if we follow those graph dots up there, it tells us exactly what each value is. Okay, so number 5 says, what is the value of the third quartile? So the very first thing I need to do is I need to understand what the third quartile is, or where it's located. So if I take a look where the third quartile is, it's right here. It's the right side of the box. So make sure you're reading that properly. Now, step 2 is find it on our graph down here and see what it's even with on the number line. Guys, what's the value of the third quartile? 90. Okay, so they want you to practice reading what each part of our box and whisker is, and then just talk about, in this first case, the value of that particular spot. Okay, if this represented the number of songs downloaded last year by a number of students, that means the third quartile means that last year the top 3/4, I guess, of the data, it would be 90 songs downloaded. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, here's the one I want you guys to try. Problem 4. Shouldn't take you very long. Okay, go. All right. Anyone need more time? Okay. 15 seconds. Go ahead and turn to your neighbor and share. Go. All right, so here we go. It says, what's the value of the first quartile? So the first quartile is, of course, the left side of the box. So when I check this out, left side of the box is right there. Value is 70. All right. Questions on that one? All right, let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the next type of problem on Box and Whisker here. Let's go down, same page. Let's take a look at number 9. Now, number 9 says, what percent of the data lie below the median? Now, first of all, step 1 is we're talking about the median. I need to know where the median is. So in this case, I'm looking, the median is right there. It's that middle line inside the box. Now, step 2 is what percent of the data. Now, if you notice, I went to this set of notes because it's talking about the percentage of data, not the value. Okay, how many songs, for example, were downloaded. It's talking about what is the actual percentage that lie below the median. Now, when you talk about below, right, you're talking about less, under. And when we talk about numbers, of course, it's to the left. So if I look and say, here's the median, what percentage of the data lie below? Between here and here, I have 25 and another 25. Two sets of 25%, which is 50%. Now in this particular case, I'll put a little step star here. Don't forget, it's asking about the percentage. So make sure you put your units. Don't put like 50 songs. Okay, that's not what it's talking about. It's 50%. You can even say 50% of the data. 50% of the data lie below the median. Okay. All right. So now we're just talking about the percentage of the data. All right. Questions about that before I let you try one? Okay, so problem I want you guys to try is problem number 10. Problem number 10. Okay, go. All right, anyone still working on that one? Okay, turn to your neighbor and share. Go. All right, here we go. It says, what percent of the data lie below the upper quartile? So now I'm looking for the upper quartile. If I look here, the upper quartile, remember, is another name for the third quartile. which is the right side of the box. So I'm looking here, and I'm saying, well, what percentage of the data lie below it? From there all the way down here. Well, in that case, it's 25% plus 25% plus a third 25%. It's a total of 75% of the data. Thus called the third quartile, third quarter, 75 cents. Right? Or in this case, 75%. Okay, questions on that one? All right, here's what I want to do next. Let's go ahead. Now we're going to get into using this in a little fake story on the back side of that paper. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at problem number 16. Now, before we do, of course, we need to read the directions at what exactly is going on here. All right, so here we go. Let's go ahead and go to the very top. Let's close read it. The number of iTunes, and everyone's with me, right? Okay, we all know where I'm at. Let's try it again. The number of iTunes downloaded by 25 in 1 week ranges from 15 to 25. The box and whisker plot depicts data. All right. So what we have is we have a box and whisker. Okay, it's exactly what we talked about in the back in my little fake story at the beginning of the lesson. Okay. However, it's not 8 students. This time it's 25. It's 25 students. There's more that they surveyed. Okay, and so it tells you the range. So when it says ranges from 15 to 55, we talked about what range is, the smallest to the largest, right? Minimum to maximum. That is shown right here with the extremes. Okay. So now what they want us to do is they want us to, of course, read this according to the story and what they're asking. So number 16 says, what is the number of iTunes at the 75th percentile? So that's a different way of asking here. So I'll take a look. And step 1 is I want to identify where that is. Now if I take a look over here, I use my notes again that we took together. The 75th percentile, well, that was just the problem we just did. It's talking about the percentages. That's another name that they give that line right there, which is the third quartile. Okay? So if I go back to this, it says, what is the number of iTunes at the 75th percentile? That is the third quartile. It's right there. And that, of course, is what I just did, was step 2. I found my third quartile. I saw what it was representing on the number line, and that was 40. Now, on this particular case, right, because this is a real life story, or kind of a real life story, right? I want to make sure I have my units. What does the 40 represent, guys? Yeah, songs. 40 songs. That's what you download on the iTunes site. 40 songs. Okay. Questions on that one before I have you try one? Okay, here's the one I want you guys to try then. Try out problem 15. Problem 15. All right, go. All right. Okay, go ahead and turn to your neighbor and share. Go. All right, So number 15 says, what's the number of iTunes? I should say, what's the number of songs on iTunes at the 50th percentile? So 50th percentile, if I take a look on the backside, you should have realized the 50th percentile is the middle. That's the median. That's that line inside the box. That line right there is represented by halfway between 20 and 30 is 25. So the number of iTunes songs at the 50th percentile would be 25. And don't forget our units, 25 songs. All right, questions on that one? Okay, one last type of problem. Let's go ahead and let's go all the way to the bottom, number 21. Okay? Here we go. It just says answer the problems 20 to 23 with the information below. So let's read the directions. Let's close read it. Let's see if we can do better this time on a close read. It says the box and whisker plot below the housing prices in thousands that are currently on the
market
in the town of Shoreside. All right. So I don't know where the town of Shoreside is. Sounds like a beach town, which would be nice right about now, right? But in all honesty, this town, don't know where it's at, but it's saying that there are a bunch of houses that are selling in that area, and this shows the price of those houses. Okay? So this is very important because believe me, you are not getting a house for $105. Okay? Houses aren't cheaper than PS4s. All right? So I know. Mind blown, right? So remember, it's in the thousands, all right? So, for example, that's $105,000, which is actually still cheap for a house, okay? So, it's either very cheap to live in Shoreside or this paper is outdated, which it's outdated, all right? So, here we go. Number 21 says, what is the maximum price of a home for sale? It's referring to Shoreside. So, step one, right, is like always, we're looking at our key vocab word in this. In this case, it's the maximum, all right? Maximum price, all right? And the maximum, of course, is shown, should be pretty easy on that one, by that end of that whisker right there. So, of course, step two is what is the value of that whisker? Now, I know it doesn't show up perfectly, bless you, but I believe whoever made this worksheet wanted it to be right exactly above that thick line, and that's 115. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down, 115. Do not forget, I'll put a little star by step two. The value is 115,000. Don't forget that. And then just like our previous lesson, or our previous problem, sorry, don't forget your units. $115,000 was the maximum price of a home for sale. Okay, questions about this part? All right, here's the one I want you guys to try out then. All right, try out problem number 20. Number 20, go. Okay, anyone need more time? All right, go ahead and turn to your neighbor and share your answer. Go. All right, here we go. So, number 20 says, what is the median price of a home for sale? So, if I take a look here, right, median price, the median is this line right here. I go ahead and take a look at the value. It's hitting that line. It's not 105, but it is that line right there. And if you take a look, 105 and 110, I'm assuming that each mark on the number line is 1. Just to double check, 106, 107, 108, 109, 1. Yep. So, If that's the case, that line right next to 105 is 106, and don't forget, of course, 106,000. We don't forget our units, $106,000. Now, I want to use this time just to wrap this up to clarify the percentage part. So let's say that, let's keep it easy. Let's say there was exactly 100 homes in Shoreside that sold. Okay? And they range, like it says, anywhere between, like $77,000 to $115,000. Okay? That's the range of the homes. Cheapest to the most expensive house in Shoreside. Now, talking about each of these, let me put this in perspective. This whole thing, there are 100 homes represented here that was sold in Shoreside. Between 77,000 and 106,000, there were 50 homes, half of them, that ranged between 77 and 106. 50 homes. Why? Because that is 50% of the amount of homes. Okay? So half of them had that large of a range. Now, there was also the other half, the more expensive homes, the top 50 most expensive homes. It ranged from 106 to 115. So much smaller range. They all kind of were around the same price for the most part. Okay? So that shows you. Then if you take a look, the most expensive 25 homes, right? 25 is 25%. 25 homes ranged between 113 to 115,000. A very tiny range. They were almost all exactly the same price. The top 25%, or the most expensive 25 homes. Okay, so it just shows you kind of not only there's value here, but also it tells you how many there were in the data set. All right, and where they all lie. Okay, so we're going to go ahead in our next lesson and take that and take what we learned about our box and whiskers, and we're going to apply it to a more 7th grade version of this lesson. All right, so box and whisker plots.